Turn your sound up, or sorry, not your sound, you're not going to hear me. Mute your computer and then also turn your video off. I think so far we don't hear any background noise, so I think we're good. Once again, thank you all very much for being prompt, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the World Athletics Rule Changes webinar. And thank you all very, very much for joining us. And I hope everybody is remaining well and safe. Thank you very, very much to Serge and Nock for giving me the opportunity to present to you tonight. And just a reminder, we're going to field all your questions or concerns at the end. So I would strongly suggest if you got a little notepad or something beside you to jot down any questions or concerns that you have. And then at the end, we will attempt to field all those. I'm only highlighting some of the rule changes, the major ones. I'm also going to highlight a few rules of note. So that's going to be our format for this evening. So I'll attempt to move the slide. Just for your information, the IAAF has now become World Athletics. As of the fall of 2019, IAAF has a new branding, which is World Athletics. In Doha at the World Championships, the branding was introduced and started to be used. Obviously, Doha had all of their signage printed up well before this, so it was kind of a meld of IAAF World Athletics. But as of January, you're going to see only World Athletics. Along with the new branding comes a new format for the rule book. Those of you who have looked online, it looks very, very different. Most notable, new rule numbers. So for those of you who are very good at memorizing rule numbers, you've got your work cut out for you because it's all brand new. This is the new logo for World Athletics. I know for Eugene, it was supposed to be the World Championships next summer. It's supposed to be Eugene 2021. And inside that colored brand there, they have very, very interesting logos that they have prepared for the World Championships, which is now put off until 2022. The World Athletics Rulebook 2020. It's comprised of the first about, well, pages 5 to 13. We have a table of rules references. This is really helpful. It's a listing of the old rule numbers along with the new rule numbers. So I know I'm having a problem. I used to be able to open the rule book to a section because I knew approximately where it was, and I could locate a rule very quickly. Now, with the new format, it's a little more difficult to find rules quickly. Those tables of rules, though, are only going to be in there for the 2020 book. After that, you won't see old rule numbers anymore. There's a section for rules of interpretation. That's sort of an introduction to the rule book. There's a section of definitions. And the most important part here, I believe it's on page 23, is the definitions of international competitions. So within the rules, when they say for competitions 1.1 through 1.8, on page 23, that's the definition of those international competitions. And before it was within the rules someplace. Competition rules, I've bolded this because it's a huge section with rules that we're going to consult a lot. And the rule numbers are now denoted with a capital C, capital R, then the rule number. That means it's in the competitive competition rules. And if it's a TR, it's the technical rules. The technical rules section is the meat of the rule book that we officials are going to deal with the most. Let's look at the competition rules first. There are 3 parts. There's a general section. There's a part 2 with the competition officials. That's where they're listing all the different officials and their roles. And the world records, they're now embedded within the competition rules, and they're in the middle of the rule book as opposed to the end. So if you ever have to consult what to do for a record, or you need to know something about the world records, it's now in the middle as opposed to at the end. Okay, let's start looking at the competition rules. Competition rule 18.1, the start referee. A referee appointed to oversee the starts is designated the start referee. Now, previous to this, they had a track referee appointed, and now it's just, they've taken track out and they've left it a referee appointed to oversee the starts. For us in Canada, what this really means is not really a change, because by definition, to be a referee, you had to have some referee status, and that's probably going to be a track referee. You're not going to pull in a field referee probably to act as a start referee. CR 18.3 is talking about the combined events referee, and it's a clarification of the jurisdiction in regard to the combined events referee. They will oversee all the events in the combined event, except in matters related to a start, if a start referee is appointed and available. So if there's a start referee on site, the combined events referee is not dealing with any matters to do with the start of a combined events, with the exception of if they need to change like a start list or that, the combined events referee is still in charge of that. But the actual start itself, the start referee is in charge if there's one appointed and available. CR 18.5, it's on the referee section. And it looks lengthy, this rule change, but all they've done is the intent hasn't changed. They've just added athlete or relay team. So this stanza says the applicable relay, the applicable referee shall have authority to warn or exclude from competition any athlete or relay team guilty of acting in an unsportspersonlike or improper manner or under rules, and those are the same rules that were listed there before. It was implied, or the intent for this rule was always to include relay teams too, but it never said it in the rules, so they just cleaned this one up a bit. And the green is, or I've made this font green because it's green in the rule book, and that was sort of clarification, or what the old referee book used to say. And this is in regard to what we just discussed on relays. It's under rule CR 18.5, and it's point 7 in the green text. In cases of relay events, cards received by one or more members of the team during any round of the event shall count against the team. Any cards received in a relay event are only applicable to the team and never applicable to an individual athlete. And for just a illustration of this, in a relay event, if one of the athletes runs on the inside of the lane or on the line, the whole team is disqualified. That athlete isn't singularly disqualified. So the same with any of the disciplinary cards, they go to the team, not the athlete themselves. Now we're under competition rule 22.2, the starter. This is clarifying the role of the starter. It was never really defined in the rule book, and here it is very, very clear. The starter, whose primary responsibility is to ensure a fair and equitable start for all competitors, shall have entire control of the athletes on their marks. So just, they've cleaned up the English a little bit and made it very clear what the role of the starter is. This is not a rule change, but I wanted to highlight this rule because it's very, very important for anybody doing any kind of recording or trying to figure out what start list abbreviations are actually meaning. And that's Competition Rule 25.4. It's the standard symbols. And it's a standard abbreviation and symbols to be used on start lists and results cards. Like in the field, there's no such thing as an F, it's an X. And so we should all be referring to this and using the proper symbols or abbreviations. Competition Rule 28 is in regard to conformity check. And the conformity check for the field was always performed before the event, supervised by the referee, and using a calibrated steel tape. What we're trying to do, or what World Athletics was trying to do, is bring track and field in alignment, in that the zero test is done previous to a session. So, and it's not done again after the session. So in the field, we used to do a conformity check before the event and following the event with a steel tape, the referee, and all of the people that needed to be there. Now it's only going to be performed before the event. But note, a set of check measurements should be made after, and if circumstances justify, during the event, usually without reference to the steel tape though. So we're still going to do a few of the checks of the tabs that we did before the field event, but we don't have to bring out the steel tape, and it takes a little bit longer. Once again, CR 31 is all the world record stanzas, and it's in the middle of the rule book, and it's not at the end. Now, here's the meat of our of the whole rule book, is the technical rules section. It's divided into 8 parts, and it's really the chapter 5 that we referred to most of the time before in our in the old format of the rule book. So there's a general section, that's the description of the oval of the track and the field and all the different site layouts. Part 2, track events. Part 3 is the field events, incorporating vertical jumps, horizontal jumps, throws. And sorry if I'm slow at changing a slide now and then. Every so often my cursor moves off of the arrow. There we go. Technical rules continued. We've got part 4, combined events. Part 5 is indoor competitions. Part 6 is race walking events. Part 7 is road races. And part 8 is cross country, mountain, and trail races all together in one. So let's start looking at the technical rules. Technical rule 5.1 under clothing, note for the call room people. The removal of the rule, athlete's vest should have the same color front and back. The reason for removing this stanza is it was very, very hard to enforce. It's very difficult to disqualify or not let an athlete run because their uniform is a different color on the front than it is on the back. So it was never really enforced. They've taken it out. TR 5.2, a couple pages on shoes. I just wanted to draw your attention to it. That is, they have, as of April 2020, have brought in a new shoe rule. And a quick synopsis is, only shoes that have been available to athletes for at least 3 months previous to the competition and been verified by the World Athletics are allowed to be used in a competition. In other words, no athlete can have a shoe made only for them. It has to be available. They can have a shoe made for them, but it has to be available to other people too. So this has come in. If you really want to know all the details, you can go to Rule 5.2 and read all through it. The shoes need verification by World Athletics, and that's been in there before. And it's similar to the verification of equipment, like shots, discus, javelin, you get the stamp of World Athletics. TR 5.5, we're still dealing with shoes. This is not new. For high jump and long jump, there were special sole thickness specifications and heel thickness specifications, but it was never defined in the rule how you actually measure this. And now they've done a very, very good job of defining, and there's a great diagram in the rule book on the on how to measure the shoes. And if you look on page 91 in your rule book, you'll find that. But if you really want to know right now, considering the back of the shoe is 0, the sole is at 75% of the length, and the heel is at 12% of the shoe length. And that's exactly where you're supposed to measure it. And it's just interesting for those of you who work in the call room. TR 5.12, non-compliance. If the referee suspects a non-compliant shoe was worn, they are able to request the shoes for inspection by the World Athletics. If the athlete refuses, or if the shoe is found to be non-compliant, the athlete's disqualified. TR 8.6, we're talking about athletes competing under protest in a field event. So in a field event, where as a result of sorry, my picture and the Athletics Canada logo are cutting off part of my slide, so I can't see half the words. In a field event where as a result of an athlete competing under protest, another athlete is allowed to continue in the competition when they would have otherwise not done so, such athlete's performance and eventual results will remain valid, irrespective of whether the oral protest is successful or not. Now, this might seem a little confusing to some, but in a field event like a horizontal jump or a throw, the athletes all receive the first 3 trials. The top 8 and anybody tied for 8th place get the final, an additional 3 throws or jumps. Let's just say in the first 3 rounds, one of the athletes has a very good throw or jump that is called a foul, or it's invalid. It's for some reason or another, and they are protesting it. And you are not, as a referee, able to verify it right there on the field. The athlete continues to throw or jump under protest. And you measured that, recorded in a special place, but since it was very good and would have taken them to the finals, you advance them to the final, even though really it should be an invalid. But you're protecting that athlete's right in case when they do the protest, it's found that it was in actual fact good. Now, in this case, we always take another athlete, the next best, so we take 9 to the final in case that trial remains invalid. We don't want to deny any athlete the right to go to the finals if they should be there. So now the trial was valid, it's found under the protest, then all of those 9 athletes' results will remain valid. That's what that's saying. I hope I didn't confuse you there. TR 9.2 is a mixed competition, or it's to do with mixed competition. And it's not really a rule change. This is another one of those where they have changed the format of the writing of this rule. Previous notes have become part of the rule. So stanzas 9.2.1 and 9.2.2 were notes before, and now they're actually in the meat of the rule. And the clarification in green text A, B, and C further defines this and makes it a little easier to understand. So Mixed competition is permitted in all national competitions, subject only to the rules of the federation. Mixed competition is permitted in a competition held under, I think that says 1.9 to 1.10 of the international competition definition, if permitted by the area association. And here's one of those times when we have to refer to the definitions page on page 23, so we know what a 1.9 and a 1.10 are. And they're invitational international competitions. And C, mixed competitions are not permitted under 1.1 to 1.8 competitions unless we're talking about field events or if it's allowed in the regulations. Now we're on to definitions of the false start. There's been a few little changes in the layout of this section, and just want to mention that we were privy to a great webinar 2 nights ago on the START team given by Ian Gordon. So thanks very much, Ian, for that. And I hope some of you, well, I'm sure some of you joined us because I recognize some of the names on our list here. So false start definition, the previous rule notes have become part of the formal definition of the commencement of the start. So 16.7.1 is the definition of a false start in a crouch start. And that defined, remember, both hands, one or both hands have to leave the ground, or one or both feet have to lose contact with the pads for starting block pads for it to be a false start. Or in a standing start, the definition, usually there's not too many false starts in a standing start because they're usually unsteady, but we can't step over the line or we can't commence our movement before the report of the gun. Now, this was well defined a number of years ago, and so really the only way you could false start was lose contact. And it was never the intent to have somebody start moving without losing contact, continue moving before the report of the gun, and continue in getting an advantage. So they have added under 16.7, and this has been in for last rule book and this one. If the starter determines that prior to receiving the report of the gun, an athlete initiated a forward movement that was not stopped or stopped and continued into the commencement of the start, it shall also be a false start. And the slang term for this one, I think somebody recognizes like a rolling start. That's definitely a false start, and it's in the rules. Note though, any other motion, if applicable, is subject to disciplinary warning or disqualification. In other words, 2 yellow cards, it's a yellow, red, and you're out. So it's behavioral. So we still have to lose contact or this motion that continues before the report of the gun. TR 17.6 is in regard to leaving the track. We all know that if an athlete voluntarily leaves the track, they are not allowed to come back and continue in the race. There's one exception though. The intent of this rule is the same with the addition of an exception in the relay, TR 24.6.3, allowing for the retrieval of a drop baton if done so according to the rules. In other words, in the process of a relay baton being exchanged within the zone, the athletes drop it. And it rolls to the infield. The athlete that dropped it is allowed to, without hindering any other athletes, leave the track, pick up the baton without shortening the distance, coming back into the exchange zone and can continue on. So they did really leave the track, but if they follow all the rules, they can continue on. 17.14 has to do with intermediate times. And this is verbal or oral intermediate times. It has nothing to do with the placement of display clocks. The appropriate referee who may authorize or appoint no more than one person to call times at each of no more than 2 agreed timing points. So it's just clarifying the referee was always allowed to appoint a person to call intermediate times if they felt it was necessary. But now it's defining only one person at 1 or 2 different places. Rule 17, TR 17.15.3 has to do with refreshments. An athlete may at any time carry water or refreshment by hand or attached to the body, provided it was carried from the start or collected or received at an official station. So it was a note before, and it's just become part of the rule so that it's very clear. If an athlete starts with a bottle of water, they're allowed to carry it for the whole race if they really, really want to. Or they can collect water or refreshments at any of the official stations. TR 20.8 has to do with progressions. It's really for the meet directors or technical delegates, but it's worth noting. In races longer than 800 meters, when rounds are conducted, it is recommended that only a small number of athletes qualify by time. In other words, we'd really like a minimum of the top 2 and the next best times move on to the next round. It would be even better if we had the top 3 from each heat move on, and then maybe only 1 or 2 qualify by time. TR 22.6 has to do with hurdle races, and there's been a number of changes here. So track referees and umpires, perk your ears up. They've changed the layout of this rule a little bit, as well as they've changed a few very, very important words. All races shall be run in lanes, and each athlete shall go over each hurdle and keep to their own lane throughout unless TR 17.4 applies. And right now, none of us remember what TR 17.4 refers to, and that's the rule referring to if you're pushed, shoved, or on the straight, this doesn't apply. TR 22.6.2, we're dealing with hurdle disqualification. An athlete is disqualified if they knock down or displace any hurdle by hand, body, or the upper side of the lead leg. Very, very different than the look of the rule before. It no longer says deliberately knocks down. They've defined it by if the athlete knocks it down by hand, body, or upper side of the leg. Now, the athlete is still allowed to go over the hurdle in any way they want. So if they put their hands on the hurdle and, jump over like you would a steeplechase barrier, that's still allowed, provided you didn't tilt the hurdle. But if it's knocked over by hand, body, or upper side of the lead leg, the athlete's disqualified. And the upper side of the lead leg would be defined as your shin or possibly your quadricep. And if you were to knock it over with that, you probably haven't cleared the hurdle. So it's taken the subjectivity out of this and made it more objective. TR 22.6.3, hurdle disqualification is continuing. The athlete directly or indirectly knocks down or displaces a hurdle in there or in another lane in such a manner that there is effect or obstruction upon any other athlete or athletes in the race, or another rule is also infringed. And I think this was basically there before, maybe a little bit of a word change. Oh, sorry. My computer decided it would change whatever it felt like. So that's the hurdle. Strongly suggest you look through the hurdle section because the look is a little bit different. Steeplechase, TR 23.5. Anybody who's a technical manager, anybody who's going to be running steeplechase in the near future, we need to drill a few holes. There's an addition of a new height for steeple barriers for U18 men. It's a brand new height. We've never done this before. It's 0.838 meters plus or minus to 3 millimeters. Previously, all men ran 0.914 meters or story steeples, and all women were 0.762. So the height in between, we need to drill holes in the barriers so that we can accommodate our U18 men. And that's as of like April 2020, and well, we're there now. TR 24.10, relay substitutions, or we're talking about relays. Once a relay team is started in a competition, up to a total of 4 additional athletes may be used as substitutes. Previously 2, so we've really upped our numbers in the relay now. TR 25.6.2 talks about field event order. And for those events, horizontal jumps, throws, where you do the first 3 rounds, and then there's a final 3 rounds, we reorder after the first 3 rounds. And that remains in the rules, and it stays like that. But in the, if regulations of the relevant governing body decide, they may specify that the competing order be changed again after any further rounds of trials after the 3rd. So oftentimes they like to reorder after the 5th to make the 6th and final round really exciting so that the best athlete competes last in the last round. But for sure after the 3rd round, and check the regulations if you're a referee to see if any further reordering is going to be done. TR 25.17 is referring to time allowed for trials in the field events. Just a reminder, this hasn't changed this year. It was changed last year, but it's 1 minute for the first trial of an athlete in the competition, or if 3 or more athletes are competing in the event. And the consecutive and the vertical jumps, different time frames remain as they were before in the rule book. But just, I wanted to confirm once again that it's 1 minute for the trial and field. For vertical jumps, we've got TR 26.6, and we're talking about height measurement. Just a confirmation or a reaffirmation that any measurement of a new height should be done before athletes attempt such a height. So whenever you put the crossbar up, you should be checking that height. This is added to the rule book though this year. A remeasurement should be done if a crossbar has to be substituted. So an athlete lands on a crossbar, which often happens in pole vault or high jump, and your crossbar is broken in half. Obviously, you have to substitute it. So a remeasurement of the height should be done in that situation. Again, we're talking about high jump. We've got TR 27.4. And for those of you who didn't know, there is a specified downward overall inclination requirement for the takeoff area. It used to be 1 to 250, which was 0.4%. and they've changed it now in the rule book to, it is now 1 to 167, which is 0.6% of downward inclination. But don't panic. You don't have to go out there and re-level your high jump fans, but just if you were building a new one, there are new specifications. Now, horizontal jumps. Any of you horizontal jumps people, you need to perk your ears up because there are huge changes in horizontal jumps this year. We're talking about the takeoff line or a board. Immediately beyond the takeoff line, there may be placed a plasticine indicator board for the assistance of the judges. Now, before you go getting all excited that you don't have to play with plasticine ever again, because it says may, not should, later you'll find out if you're not using video or you don't have some type of a camera situation on the board that you better be using plasticine. Note, if such a board, as in the plasticine board, is not used, then it should be replaced or the recess should be filled with a blanking board flush with the takeoff board, so it doesn't go up 7 millimeters like the plasticine board does. And this is for the horizontal jumps people. This is the blanking board that you would put in during the warm-up so that they don't ruin all your beautiful plasticine. Rule 29.5, this is a little bit new. Video for horizontals. The use of video or other technologies to assist the judges in deciding the application of TR 30.1 is strongly recommended. Otherwise, a plasticine indicator board may still be used, really should be used. And you're going to find out that the TR 30, I'll give you a hint, its breaking of the plane is now a fault. It's not just making a mark in the plasticine. So, but I'll read that to you in a minute. Now I lost my cursor again. Here we go. TR 29 is the indicator board, and that's your plasticine board. It has changed in the construction. So I've got a diagram for you. So if this sounds, you can't really understand what they're talking about, hold on, I got a diagram for you. The edges of the indicator board shall be cut away such that in relation to the recess, when filled, the plasticine, the surface of the, with plasticine, the surface of the plasticine near the takeoff line should be at an angle of 90 degrees. So it's not on an incline like previous. It's going to be cut away and square, and it looks like this. If you looked in your rule book on page 190, you're going to see this, this diagram. But also, if you look here, oh, Serge made the blue circle for me. Excellent. It's cut away at a 90-degree angle, even with the runway. But before the event, you're going to fill that with plasticine. And you're definitely going to get a mark if somebody breaks the plane. Okay? So we no longer have the incline. The indicator or plasticine board still is 7 millimeters, as you see on the other side where Serge has got the circles. It's still 7 millimeters up, but it's cut out. And then you're going to fill that with plasticine. Because if you see the rule coming up now, here's our TR 30.1.1, horizontal jumps. Athlete fails if they, while taking off, break the vertical plane, doesn't say make a mark, break the vertical plane of the takeoff line with any part of their foot or shoe, whether running up, without jumping, or in the act of jumping. Okay, so all brand new. Now we're moving into the throwing. TR 32.2, throwing implements. Unless the technical delegate decides otherwise, not more than 2 implements may be submitted by any athlete for any throwing event in which they are competing. So athletes in some competitions are allowed to use their own, their personal implements, but they have to be submitted to the technical manager to be weighed in and verified to make sure they're the appropriate specifications. The rulebook has now limited the number of implements that you can bring, and it's only 2. Really, this will only probably be applicable to discus and javelin. Not too many people bring 3 or 4 shots with them or hammers, but they do bring a number of discs and they do bring a number of javelins. Like I've seen 4 and 5 in a sleeve. Now you can only bring 2. Well, you can bring as many as you want, but you can only weigh in 2. Now we're talking about a discus competition. And for those of you who aren't aware, most of our competitions, hammer and discus, use the same cage. Not too many sites do we have a separate discus cage and a separate hammer cage. So now in a discus competition, the hammer cage movable panels, which are the gates, may be used when the cage is being used for a discus throw to limit the danger zones. So we're not going to close the cage gates like we do in hammer into the sector, but to decrease the danger zones, we might use those gates or panels along the sector line. Now we're talking about combined events and all the rules that you see listed at the top there. 39.2, 39.3, 39.4, 39.5, and 53, I think it is. I can't read it because our pictures are in the way. Those all relate to decathlon and heptathlon in the combined events area. And the 53 one refers to indoor competitions, 53.2. In combined events, the decathlon or the heptathlon shall be held on consecutive 24-hour periods in specified orders. This is defining days, that's all. The intent is the same, I would say, but just defining what a day is. TR 54.8, 55.6, and 56.6 refer to race walk, road racing, cross-country starts. In all of these, now they've aligned them. Races shall be started by the firing of a gun, cannon, air horn, or like device. Basically, in any of the off-track or out-of-stadia events, you can use a gun, cannon, air horn, or like device to start the race with. The TR 54 deals, that whole section deals with race walking, and there's reference to a penalty area, and there's some rule changes. Those are going to be covered in a future session by Daniel Michaud, because he is our expert in Canada. We are so, so fortunate. He's been on the World Athletics International Walks panel, I'd like to say since the beginning of time, but he has been there for eons. And he is also in Doha. He was the chief race walks judge for the World Championships. So there's no one better to tell us about the race walking rule changes, penalty area, all of that. I'm going to leave that up to him at a later session, and it will entice you to register for another webinar. TR 57, this whole section, if you look at your rule book, has bars beside it, you know, all the 3 pages or how many ever there are there. It's mountain and trail racing. And basically what they've done in the rule book, previous to this, we had a mountain section, we had a road race section, we had a mountain section, and we had a trail race section. They've just combined mountain and trail racing. And the section is very, very similar to road racing. I just wanted to draw your attention to it, that's all. That's it for the major rule changes or revisions that I have pulled out. It is now your turn to talk or ask any questions that you might have, and I'll do my best to clarify or answer any questions you have.
I just want to make sure that you're just putting in your chat question. I will go through like this instead of having the chaos. David Keenan has a comment about the sole of the shoes. The shoes. David.
Hey, Jane. Actually, it says that the supplier of the shoes has to give the public 4 months, not 3 months, as specified in the slides.
Okay. Thanks for that revision. I thought I copied it out of the rule book, but obviously not.
Okay.
Pritam has a question. Go ahead.
So Jane, about the rule 30.1.1 for the vertical plane in horizontal jump and everything, is it really going to be applied as from November this year, or is it going to be delayed or something like?
No, it will be applied as of November. They held off a bit so that everybody could get that equipment organized.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
But it will, unless Athletics Canada makes a revision, but that's a pretty major rule to make a revision on. I would say as of November, breaking the plane in long jump is a fault.
Pritam, you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. That's fine. Thank you.
David Keenan has another question.
Oh, thanks. So Jane, on Rule 17.6, it talks about when an athlete leaves the track.
Yes.
Where must the athlete re-enter the track? Does it have to be where they exited, or can they continue on and re-enter the track wherever they want?
No. This is in regard to the relay. When a baton is dropped and rolls into the infield, they have to re-enter the track where they exited from, or where they left from, and they can't shorten the distance of the race. So no, you don't keep running forward. Where you leave the track and where you come back on have to be the same.
Okay, I just don't see that in the rule.
Oh,
that's common in race walk, but
if you look further in the under relay, you'll see it in there.
Okay, thanks, Jane.
No problem.
Doris has a question.
Sorry, I was asking about a disqualification and hurdles, and in the past, a kicking motion that looked purposeful resulted in a DQ. So now they've reworded it to say the top of the leg. So does that mean that if they kick it but strike the hurdle with the bottom of their foot, it no longer results in a disqualification?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Because you can't determine the intent of an athlete.
Indeed.
And when it said deliberate, knocking down of the, how can you decide whether it's deliberate or not? Hey, if you push it over with your hands, I would say it's deliberate, but how do you define deliberate? So they tried to take away that subjectivity and made it more objective or clear or factual. So if you push it over with your hands, your body, or the top of your lead leg, then it's a disqualification.
Excellent. Thank you.
Gary Friedman, you have a question?
Yes. you say that if an athlete breaks the plane, they sometimes may not leave a mark. The athlete complains, hey, that jump doesn't, isn't a fault because there is no marker. I don't believe I did cross the plane. And let's say you're not using a video camera. Like, what do you say? How do you evidence the jump that they did break the plane?
No problem, Gary. If you look again at that little diagram of what the plasticine border or the indicator board is going to look like now, the plasticine is at a 90-degree angle with the takeoff board. I guarantee you, if they break the plane, there's going to be a mark.
I'm just thinking of some of the shoes that the tip of the shoe is pointed up a little bit.
Correct. But still, if you've got a little wall of plasticine, shoes don't curl that much. While before, the indicator was at a slant or an incline up, and so the shoe could overhang and not make a mark. Now, you've got a 90-degree, like little wall straight up of plasticine. It's going to make a mark.
Okay. All right.
And that's why most of the time you're two official on the board. That means both of you will see the same thing at some point. That means you will have a backup in front of you.
Yeah, most of the time.
Yeah. Thank you. Brian Beck, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a technical kind of question. Is this webinar being recorded? And if so, will it be available to us?
It's recorded. Sorry, it's recorded, but I will try to do my best. It's kind of, I'm new with that stuff. I mean, it's recorded.
Yeah, but even if there was a link put somewhere so that people could access it if they wanted to, or even just the slides.
No, the slide will be sent to you tonight.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much.
Copy of the slide, but it's recording at the same time. But I'm not sure about the result of the recording.
Oh, okay.
Other question? Just write on the chat question. That's my order.
Brian, my hair might not be quite right, so we might have to change the recording.
It looks fine to me.
There are the question. And there's no question.
Good.
I just realized after the fact, but there was a maximum of 100 people on the webinar, and we're 124. That means there's people, and if you're talking to people, and they will receive a copy of all the people who were registered. They will receive a copy of the presentation, and we'll do something. We'll do something with the 24 people waiting or something. I'm sorry about that. John Monroe?
Serge and I will deal with that later.
Yep.
John, I'm going to get your question in 2 seconds. I just want to make sure before everybody signs off to thank everybody for participating tonight. I hope you got something out of it. And thank you again to Serge and Nock for organizing these webinars. It's a welcome relief to see people and talk some track in this time of isolation. And for those of you who are interested, we have a webinar on June 1st. It's on the World Para Rules, and it's going to be presented by David Weicker. So if you haven't already, make sure that you register for that. And there's a whole list of webinars upcoming. So I think we've got them through into July. So once a week at least, you can tune in with us and learn a little bit of something about the rules. And I want to make sure that you all have a great evening and stay well. John, what have you got? John, did you have a question?
Okay, two things on completely different topics.
Sure,
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. The business about the combined events, ref and the starts ref, does that mean the starts ref only takes precedence over the combined events ref for the actual races in the combined events grouping, or all the way through?
Yes, just for the start, John, yes. Just for racing,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Question number 2. The change for the only allowed, the throws athletes are only allowed to bring 2 implements.
Yes,
Are they allowed to bring multiple, but only 2 come out, or they're only allowed to bring 2 to the table in the first place?
they're only allowed to check in 2 for verification.
Okay. Okay. So it's not going to be up to the people at the table to figure out athlete X brings 4 javelins in and which ones do they want. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
I have 3 questions, and after that, we'll going to Pritam has a question. Go ahead, Pritam.
Yes, Jane, I have a question about the time allowed for doing a trial or whatever. It's with regard with the one, the note, it's the rule, sorry, 25.17, the note 4, where it says that, okay, if an athlete is going to attempt a world record or any other record relevant to the competition, the time is being allowed at least 1 minute more, something like. So typically here we used to have like a provincial record or national record, but it is during a competition, they do have meet record and everything. So does that also apply to this type of stuff or no?
No, unless.
Because for them, it's organizing
un-
1 and 0.
Sorry, I interrupted you. The extra minute.
I'm telling you that for them, the meet Z.
Sorry,
Go on, I'm waiting for you. Sorry.
okay, you're waiting for me. Great. The minute only is in regard to world records, because at a world championship, the Olympics, any international meet, people are trying to get area records, national records. There's a whole myriad of different records that they could try to achieve. It's only world records that you get an extra minute in the case that they're attempting that in a field event. And realistically, they get more than a minute because the whole stadium, usually the competition director will make sure the whole stadium is watching an attempt at a world record. So they'll wait till race ends or, whatever. But you as a referee can't just give an extra minute because you think a provincial or a national record might be attempted. Is that clear?
That's fine. Thank you.
No problem.
Cora, Andreas, you have a question?
Hi, Jane, it's Cora.
Hi,
Back
Cora.
to the throwing implements. So say I check in 2 discs, but 1 disc does not measure properly. Can I check in a second one?
If the technical manager wants to allow you to, they could. You're allowed to check in 2, so we hope that they're 2 valid ones.
Okay, but like say both of them didn't measure, then you could bring 2 different ones or...
Yes, as I say, the technical manager, I mean, if he or she wanted to read the letter of the law, they could say, sorry, you're allowed to check in 2. Both of them didn't make it, so your time is up.
Okay, so then it's kind of more up to the technical manager person?
Yes. But to
Okay,
be fair, if they didn't check in, if I were your technical manager, I would allow you to bring another one.
Okay, awesome.
There's no more question. I just want to really take that I'm thanking James to the presentation. I'm thanking everyone to be listening to James' presentation, and hope to see you next week, June 1st, with the World Paraclitic webinar next week. And you will be receiving new one today. That there will be the call room officiating in a call room will be a new webinar. Will be June 17. You will receive that information after that one. As well, I was saying that you will receive a copy of the presentation and a survey. You did receive the survey in your email just before the webinar. Please answer that. Will be helpful to us to improve and to be creating more webinar and more information for you, and that's part of my job to do that. I'm enjoying that. And then Wicker, the answer is no.
Serge?
Yes, Lily.
Serge and Jane, I just want to say thank you very much. It was a great presentation. Really enjoyed it. Well job.
Super,
well
Lily.
done.
Thank you.
Awesome job, Jane. I knew you'd rock it.
Thanks, Jen.
Chat with you later.
Thank you very much, Jane. That was very.
Thanks, Jane. Well done.
Great job, Jane.
And thank you.
Well done, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.